everyone. Welcome back to The Power of Eight, where myself, Jennifer Smith, and my co-host, Pollyanna Blanco, is going through this book, The Power of Eight. Today is chapter 8, The Holy Instant. And I loved this chapter. It talks a lot about the very first sentence is, it is as if my brain is wired to a bigger network. That's what one of the participants said from the intention experiments, the peace experiments. And there's a lot of information here about mystical experiences in that altered state of consciousness. And so that's what we'll be going through today. Pollyanna, what did you think about this chapter?
I found it to be a really fascinating and exciting chapter because it really, I almost felt it as I was reading it, actually, just the feedback from the participants in the intention experiment. And it really, for anyone who's ever maybe wondered what unity consciousness means or is about, and or even mystical experience, I love the part. This is a good chapter really to dive into, because I love the point too that was made about that these peak experience moments, which the whole chapter sort of focused on, the holy instant, as they say in A Course in Miracles, is this moment where all the sort of sense of separateness falls away. And in the past, it was sort of thought this was just for otherworldly experiences. I feel like this chapter is so timely for where we are now in the world, because it's all about how do we anchor it here now in our everyday lives, and I think that's one of the biggest messages I took away, because I know for years myself, and I'm not sure about you, Jennifer, I'm curious, like I know my own journey, I sort of awakening thought a mystical experience was something, reserved for sort of very people and out of reach, I guess, and to simplify, it would require an enormous amount of training and dedication to get there. And while all those things are valuable, I felt like this chapter kind of brought it back down to earth, right? That this is available right here and right now. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I guess I didn't really know what to expect or what I thought about mystical experiences. I didn't really have any ideas whatsoever. You do hear a lot of stories about how much training it takes, and there's different traditions that do a tremendous amount of work for this. And I would say that, yeah, this brings it back down to earth, where it's possible for each and every one of us to do this. And really, I believe that the real key is to really work on quieting the mind. It always goes back to quieting the mind, right? And you and I have done quite a bit of inner work ourselves too. So I can't explain exactly when the first experience I had was, but all the work I do is really about positive mindset, quieting the mind, trusting, and having faith.
I love that. Yeah. And actually, you anticipated my question, because I was going to ask you a mystical experience yourself. And if anyone who's listening right now has had a mystical experience in their life, and they feel, inspired to share, a little bit about that, or just if they've had one, we'd love to hear your live right now or afterwards if you're watching the replay. Would you like me to share the experience I had, Jennifer, years ago?
Yes, please do. Please do.
Just because I think it relates to this chapter. And okay, so in a nutshell, I was invited, this is before I'd even heard of Reiki. I was invited by a friend of mine to go see a woman who was doing Reiki for a Reiki session. And I went to her, I think it was the second session or the third session, I can't remember exactly, but I was lying on the table, and all of a sudden I'm a very visual person, and I started getting a felt sense as well as a visual of this sort of amorphic violet being. And it was sort of amorphic because it suggested it was a figure, but it was more like a sort of a silhouette. But what was more impressive than just the visual was this felt sense of this incredible peace, a pure, and it was a peace that my rational mind was trying to make sense of. And so the way of it was to say, I think this is what it feels like to be back in the womb again, where, you know, every need is provided. And then I heard this message that love can move mountains. And what was so interesting about that peak experience was it was completely unexpected. I didn't have any special training. I guess I was just open to a whole new experience of something that I was just scratching the surface about. I didn't know about Reiki, or really, I was just curious. And in hindsight, even now, when I remember I had that experience, I don't know, but I think for a lot of people, at least I'll speak for myself, you know, oftentimes we have memories of things and we can kind of relive them a little bit in our minds. But there was something really unique about the felt sense of this experience. While I'm aware of the memory of having gone through it, to actually go back to feel exactly of what I felt in that moment, I haven't gotten back to again. It's because it stayed with me, and sometimes I can't remember what I did yesterday. So yeah, that was just, you know, one of those, I feel like it unlocks something in me. And I think that's the beauty of mystical experience, is that it kind of cuts through all of the illusion and just plants a seed inside of us.
Yeah. Well, also in those experiences, I think there's quite a bit of healing that takes place, because you're letting go. Sometimes you're letting go of memories. Sometimes you're downloading memories of things that are just innate to us. And I think that goes back to that definition of healing, that, you know, everybody needs healing, because even if you're in good physical shape and you feel pretty good emotionally most of the time, your healing can keep expanding and expanding and expanding, because that's what we're doing. We are expanding our conscious awareness with that. And yeah, I've had many experiences, but that's because I do the practices before the practices. What I mean by that is just quieting the mind, meditation, um, just 15, 20 minutes in the morning, and then also right before I go to bed. So I would say probably within the last 2 years, there has been much more happening that we probably can't explain, which is allowing more and more people to have these experiences as well. And if they're studying it, it's a beautiful experience. If they just haven't, they're not quite sure what it is, they may be, not experiencing it to the fullest that they could be, or enjoying it to the fullest that they could be. So, there's many descriptions here on what it sounds like, and I loved how, because it's difficult to describe whenever you have the experience. Like, what does that feel like? Because it just feels like an inner peace. It feels like such a lightness. It feels like, let me just describe some of the things here in the chapter that they said. And I like this chapter. I'm going to go back and read it again and suggest it to a few people as well that haven't read this book.
Jennifer,
Yes.
do you mind if I just jump in for a quick sec? Because before
Sure.
you share the chapter, just one of the things that I remember from that peak experience was the message that, and not just a message, but like it was like an awareness. Like you mentioned, the consciousness piece of the healing. It was, everything is so dense on earth. Like that came in through a felt sense rather than just a thought itself. You know, that was like a lived moment of awareness, heightened awareness. So I love that you brought up that piece about how, even if we're healthy, that healing is about returning to the fullest sense of that wholeness, right? So
Mhm. Yeah. And you had gotten a message. How did that come into you? Was it like something, was it a hearing? Did you hear it?
Yes, I heard that message. It was interesting. Now that you're asking me to reflect, because we have different channels that we receive information from, right? I heard
Mhm.
it, I saw the image, and I also had an embodied felt sense of it. So it was sort of feeling, seeing, and hearing.
That's good. That's a full experience right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you for letting me jump in. I want to hear this, what you wanted to share from the chapter there.
Well, there's just different, beyond time and space is how some of the participants described it. They described it as a state of unio mystica, or a state of mystical rapture. There's the book, The Course in Miracles. That's what they call this, the holy instant. Um, an altered state of consciousness. Cosmic consciousness. That was
Okay.
that's also how Dr. Charles Tart referred to this as well. So it's these are all real experiences that we all can have,
Yes.
and they're
Yes.
beautiful experiences.
And it's interesting too, because I feel like that's that we were talking about it in the last show too, like where two or more are gathered, right? It's the amplification, right? And this chapter really extends that. And what you were just sharing about, everyone can have this experience, it's available. And I think, we go throughout our day-to-day lives, and it can be easy sometimes to get distracted by all the things that to differentiate things, as opposed to shifting into that moment of presence where you're looking beyond the surface of things. You're looking, and when I say looking, I'm speaking about looking literally, but I'm also talking about just, opening up to just like just being here now, like you were talking about when you meditate in the morning and the evening. And I know it's that it's that soul gazing, it's that gazing into the collective energy that, in this case, I guess the intention itself. And
Mhm.
just when I say losing the self, I mean losing a sense of that separation, right? And you know through that higher intention, that larger good, there's just all greater gap energies, right?
Yeah. I would like to describe, there's a couple things. I described my experience, you described yours in Reiki, but I think what we should point out here is this was during just the intention with a gathered group that was all in that energy. And I have experienced that as well. And you can do this with getting together with a group of like minds who are clearing their mind and maybe sending light and love, or whatever the beautiful intention is of this gathering. But there were 11 women at that time, and we were all connecting via Zoom to do this gathering. And it was really just clearing our mind and just being in that inner peace. But that was one of the women's comments afterwards, was she said she thanked all of us for that altered state of consciousness that she had experienced. So this is a way to maybe experience it, I would say, a little quicker, unless people are already doing the inner work and clearing the mind, because these states can be had just by yourself too.
Yeah. And what's interesting when you talk about the inner work, I feel like for anyone who's maybe newer to that term and what it means, like probably there are a lot of people watching that are already very familiar with it. And just in case anyone, because I know in the beginning, I'm going to be completely transparent here. When I was on my inner awakening journey, people would talk about their inner work. I sort of intimated what it was, but I didn't quite get it, right?
Mhm.
And you know inner work is, I'm curious how you see inner work. Like, how do you, like, in my case, I see it as like removing, well, not so much removing, but just allowing those layers of illusion, confusion, of noise to kind of dissolve away, so that what remains is the essential, like the love, that presence. Because, yeah, well, what's your sense of doing inner work? How would you describe it?
I would say my inner work, and this isn't how it was described, was I worked with Bob Proctor, and it was all about positive thinking and talking about the inner core of who you are is this divine perfection. So anything that you're thinking outside of that is false. So it's really going through, okay, what, I guess we started with, what is it that in my reality don't I like, and how would I like for that to be? And then really reinforcing yourself with positive affirmations and reading and understanding that you are this divine perfection, because our self-talk, whenever we really pay attention to that, can be so I guess you could say, a self-confidence builder. But some people may say, oh, I have good self-confidence because I felt like I did before I started. But then whenever you really quiet your mind and listen, there's just more that comes to the surface that you really have to pay attention to and clear. So that's the inner work. It's like you just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then also along with that, I was doing Reiki at the same time. So it was just that energy, pulling in that energy, that inner peace, that calmness, connecting to who we really are.
For sure.
And knowing that.
Yes, and I love how you describe that, because it's sort of, when you talked about the Reiki, I had that felt sense of like maintaining equilibrium. And the piece just before you mentioned the Reiki is that sense of noticing what we're noticing, right? And because the more, as our awareness expands and we notice more, and then you had certain tools from working with Bob Proctor that you carried in it with your Reiki, about once you became, it's like you turn a light on in a room, you can't unsee what you just saw. So it's like, now what are you going to do with it? And having tools to move through what you're noticing, right? And because one of the things, I think one of the biggest myths for me on my own inner journey has been thinking that it's like cleaning up a room, I'll be done. And the room will be tidy and that's it. Well, no. The difference is not that there will always be in the room the peanut gallery of the mind, right? The noise from that. It's just the relationship to it, how we frame it, how we notice it, how we engage or don't engage with it is sort of, at least in my experience, like that's sort of where I've come to in my own journey, is that, awareness that it's the inner work is having a whole new, like birthing a whole new self and a whole new awareness of what self is. And then when I say the self, linking it back into this chapter, self is not just this individual projection of a human form, right? The self is the collective self, if you will, or the unity concept, all hearts beating as one. So it's when you have a beam of light and then it gets refracted into the different rays, through a prism of all the different 7 colors of the rainbow, that it's this, like, we're all refractions of that same light.
Yeah. And I think how things get, I don't know what the right word for it, but whenever we refract, whenever we dissipate the light, that's all due to our doubts and worries. So it's really training the brain to be positive, to have that ease and flow, joy and ease, flow, trust, everything like that. I would say too that probably with the mystical experiences, that I have. There was, Bob held up this book one day. So I got this, and it's called The Mystic Path to Cosmic Power. So I read that. I mean, I've read several books on things like this. And then, of course, we have our spiritual teachers that also helped us, taught us a little more about the mystic side of life. So there's been some trainings and some teachings that I went through. But I would say the biggest part is really just allowing, having that positive mindset, trusting, allowing, and paying attention to you yourself during the day. So that's the biggest part of the study, is paying attention to you. Like, what am I thinking? Why am I thinking that? And really building a strong mindset to think positive.
Yes, it's so important because really, you got me thinking, Jennifer, for a second. A question just popped into my head out of nowhere. What is the negative, anyways? Because really, if there only is unity,
Yeah.
almost. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'm asking it as a rhetorical question, and I shouldn't answer my own rhetorical question, but it's just something that I kind of felt like just popped into my mind because at the end of the day, I mean, it may be that, how we live in a sort of polarization, and it's like the the positive is that focusing on, what we do have, what we have to be grateful for, you the abundance, right? And the negative is sort of the lack and the what's not happening or what's not turning out the way we want it to. And we know from our studies and, with various teachers and different frequencies to it, different, emotional energies have different frequencies to it. And so it's interesting. I'm feeling kind of spontaneously guided to share that. I know we've talked about it here. I'm gonna share it in just a moment. But as you were speaking, I was also feeling into, like, I wanted to say that law of entrainment, right? Because when you're in a collective group, even if you don't have quote unquote special training, but the group is of a certain frequency, there's that law of entrainment, I think, that starts to take over. And so people are invited into the possibility of this peak experience if, like you just said, they're open and willing to be present and set the intention to the best of their capacity to quiet their, and be, so it's interesting.
Yeah, and with the group atmosphere, it's like everyone who's participating, who has cleared their mind, just, or being a clear channel. We talk about being a clear channel. It's like the frequency of that group, everybody raises, their whole vibration raises. And this kind of reminds me of the Egyptian healing rods, which I have right here.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you have them with you.
And when we talk about the frequencies with these and the vibrations, and we can use those with couples can use them, where they, one's holding on, where your partner would be on the other end and holding on to these. And that puts you in a vibrational state that is the same. So now the two people are in the same vibrational state, and you always are lifted up to the one that has the higher vibration. So I just see that as the group too, that everybody just lifts up, so everybody can experience those, that mystical state.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love the example with the Egyptian healing rods. They are powerful. And another thought just popped into my mind, but before I share it, I just want to thank the people who are here with us live and who've taken a moment to comment. There's a comment here: love you, self. Yes, y'all of ourselves. So there. Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to share that, and also for sharing inner peace, and with a lot of lovely emoticons. So that's wonderful in this sacred space. I feel like right now in the world, these peak experiences, these mystical experiences, people are often craving these, and they don't even realize that that's what they're craving. And that's where, because they're looking sort of in all the wrong places, in quote unquote, to find that where it can't be found, right? And just to kind of way to earth, like addictions, compulsions, obsessions, overwork, kind of strictly other things that, it's because there's such a craving for that connection, for that sense of that deeper sense of belonging, like even this sort of existential sense of like, why am I here? Especially when, for all intents and purposes, some of the things as things are falling apart and new things are emerging can look, can really ruffle and be unsettling and beyond to our emotional body, our mental body. This is almost like, if you think about the sort of restoration equilibrium collectively, it's have opportunities for people mystical experiences, right, in their day-to-day lives. And what are your thoughts on that?
You had mentioned things happening and how that can affect people. But if you are aware of this information, a lot of the things that are happening in people's physical worlds, like what they're saying on the news, really has no effect on people if they understand why all of this is happening. I saw something the other day where it says you can get involved in that and walk in the pain if you want to, or you can lift above it, lift your consciousness above it, and just kind of view it for what it is. So I thought that was really good. It was a good explanation.
Yeah, it's like an invitation. It's like an invitation, right, to step onto that path. It's a choice.
Yeah, and I have to pull this in because I wrote it down whenever I read this chapter. But we're talking about meditation in the morning because that really raises your vibration and it sets up your day for how your day is going to be. I kind of see whenever we run into things that's a reflection back to for us, like what in me invited this to be. But if you start your day off in a higher vibration and that meditation can really get you there, your day will be much, much better. And this is all throughout any books I've ever read, even before spirituality and understanding this, just in personal development books, like the Habits of Highly Effective People. He would tell you, sit for 5 minutes in a chair and clear your mind before the day, so it's everywhere. But then Abraham Hicks, she always says to, meditate for 15 to 20 minutes in the morning and make sure that she says, make sure that you're on the high flying disc, because that's where you want to be for the day. If you start off low, you're probably going to run into like grumpy people, because that's a reflection of where you are. But if you start off on a higher frequency, a higher level, a higher awareness, your whole day is going to, people's whole day is going to be much, much better. And that's true because I pay attention to that and I experienced that myself.
Same here. And this is a beautiful example, what you just shared, of how people can literally bring the mystical into their day-to-day lives, the way they choose, right? This is how we can be of service, and it's not about, it could be a monk sitting on a mountaintop. It doesn't have to be only that. Like, this is how the new earth is birthing. And, it's another thing I just want to add in, because it's something that has been present in my practice now for a while. And lots of, there are plenty of opportunities, like there are in everyone's life, right? And in my life, to remind me of, and I've in the playground of my own life, I've been like, oh, if I do it today and then I don't do it tomorrow, let's notice through contrast what happens. So it's oftentimes what I'll do is I'll from off of someone else, by sending love. Mm-hmm. And sometimes ho'oponopono, like, I love you, please forgive me, thank you, something like that. Or even just, the higher self of that person, that maybe there might, be some confusion or misunderstanding, help, just saying, help me to co-create peace in this moment. Help me to co-create ease. Help me to co-create. And it's uncanny. Like I've been noticing with all the energy shifting on the planet of recent, even more, that is like almost my go-to thing. I think I shared it a few episodes back that I've been finding now it's far more effective to communicate with people higher self to higher self. You could say it other ways too, maybe star consciousness to star consciousness, or whatever languaging you feel guided to
That's
use.
how the mystical way would say it. Star consciousness to star consciousness.
Yeah, right over here. And it's amazing because there are things for the highest good of all. They just happen. There doesn't have to be a debate, a discussion, an argument. And if they don't happen, I just accept it too, because I've released it to the highest. I've trusted the divine presence in me, to the divine presence in someone else. And then I trust the divine to guide both of us for the highest outcome. And so I can let go of being attached to an end result. And as a result, it's amazing how when I do receive maybe something I was asking for, like peace or resolution with someone, or anything, and it emerges naturally, I'm like humbled by that, because it's like it invites more of that trust in, and it helps me to get it.
Yeah, another thing, just to describe what you've said, which I help clients that come in, and I just kind of see where they're at and what they're comfortable with. But in the morning, doing a gratitude list, and then sending love to people or a situation that they're not liking right now. So sending that love, just vibrating it from your heart, sending love to people, is very similar to what you described with the higher self, talking to the higher self. But that works. It works.
Yeah. Oh, I love
It works
that.
to help resolve many things, because we're letting the spiritual realm help us.
Jen, something just popped into my mind. For years, we've been calling it inner work. Maybe we should call it inner play.
Inner what?
Inner play.
Oh.
Because I feel like, and you made this comment a few shows back, the more we consistently practice and integrate these ways of being with ourselves and engaging with the world into our daily lives. At first, it can feel like inner work, because we're cleaning out that closet that we just shut the door to for many years. And then as we start to release, over time, it does get lighter and easier. There's more ease, more grace, more joy, more creative flow, more divine guidance, more trust. And so even if there is a wobbly moment, it's of a track record with ourselves and the divine to recognize what's going on. Been there, bought that t-shirt, and to have received the wisdom from it, and to have everything, all those divine creative inner resources at our right in our present moment to assist us and to help us restore equilibrium, restore that connection, our frequency, everything. So it's so beautiful, right? It's a process of emergence.
It is, and sometimes I feel like we make it too hard for ourselves. It doesn't have to be hard. It could be very easy if we could just overwrite some of our belief systems. Um, it doesn't have to take a long time, but sometimes it does. But that's kind of what we're doing to ourselves, right? And I mean, I think we continue to go through it because we still pay
Yeah.
attention. But Bob told us the hardest thing that you'll ever have to do is real thinking. That's the hardest thing. And once you got that down, once you can just relax, you can attract anything that you need to you. You can manifest anything that you need. Life is supposed to be so much easier than what we have been led to believe. So it's just overriding those old paradigms, pulling in the new belief systems. And as soon as you can get that done, which you can do it in an instant if you're good, then that's all you need to do. But make it a little bit harder. I don't know why we make it so hard.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's something that's been actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something that's been omnipresent on my mind recently. And as I was playing with that, I had a couple of things just manifest really quickly. Like there was some, because of something with our teaching contract, I knew that we were going to be getting some back pay, and that happened back in, I think it was May or June. I think it was June. And I thought, okay, that's it. And then all of a sudden, last week, I woke up, I saw my bank balance, and I was like, microphone drop, what just happened? And it was like, there's more. Oh, because I knew I had a mentalization that a lot of my colleagues do of, we get a coffee for free in teaching, we're really abundant, right? And there's that plaque that was still there. And I was like, oh. and then, I also started examining some other thoughts that were kind of like pop-ups, like you get on the internet in my mind, that you're like, I'd like to decline this advertisement. And and then all of a sudden, when I became consciously aware of it and said, thank you, but no thank you, I'm going to choose this, then all of a sudden, out of the blue, someone who I haven't talked to in probably 7 years reached out to me and said, let me know when you're doing another retreat down here. I would be there in a heartbeat. And she bought one of my books, the one that I had co-authored with the multi-author book. And then she asked how she could get a copy of the book I wrote that's actually hitting its 10th anniversary this fall. And I was just like, out of the blue, like that. And it was so easy and so instantaneous. And the key I just want to share is it wasn't about efforting and having to make it happen and hustle and all that kind of
Right.
right? And it's just more about the inner work. The beauty of it is it's all about coming home to ourselves. It's all about just being at peace, in love, and connecting to our joy. And just, we're so focused on the outside world. And I feel like what she's talking about in this chapter, just to bring it back into the chapter, is the power of that communion. It can be, because I think the bridge for a lot of us is we're in that outside world with other people, outside of us, with this intent to hold an intention together. And whether it's over distance, like typing, or physically in person, it's just that power of that communion. It entrains us, and it also helps us to, it's that belonging, that soul belonging, that is the truth of who we are. We're not separate. It's a beautiful bridge back into that remembering, right?
Yes.
Do you mind if I share a quote from the book?
Yeah, please do.
I'm gonna put my glasses on for this. It was on page 88. It was where William James described the experience of a clergyman whose mystical episode felt like a face-to-face confrontation with God. My soul opened out as it were into the infinite, and there was a rushing together of two worlds, the inner and the outer. The ordinary sense of things around me faded. For the moment, nothing but an ineffable joy and exaltation remained. It is impossible fully to describe the experience. It was like the effect of some great orchestra when all the separate notes have melted into one swelling harmony that leaves the listener conscious of nothing save that his soul is being wafted upwards and almost bursting with its own emotion. I just felt it was so poetic. The words just really touched me. So I just felt I really wanted, it's a bit longer, but I wanted to share it.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. It's really hard to describe. So this this chapter is great for anyone to read, because if you're reading through these, you might, some things might touch you a little more than others or resonate with you, so you can get a sense of what this is like. Or if you've had the experience, we love to learn how you would describe that experience as well.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Jen, because we have someone else who's joined us here too, and has said good afternoon, ladies. And I agree, and I'm glad. Hopefully, we're not fading in and out anymore as we were earlier. So thank you for being here as well too, and for joining us. And so, okay, very poetic. Thank you very much. That's great. Just out of curiosity, like, have either of you, can you relate to this? Like, have you had mystical experiences? Are you looking to experience mystical experiences? Is there anything you feel inspired to share right now? Do you have any questions you feel like asking? Give you a moment.
We'll give them a moment, and then this would probably be a great time to end this chapter. I would like to, this is what I have underlined. It was Greeley's view that anyone undergoing this state is actually afforded insight into a greater reality. And I love that, because that's, I've talked to many people about, there's multiple realities. And so I just wanted to point that out. And then next week, we will be going over chapter 9, Mystical Brain. So I'm sure that one will be quite exciting to talk about as well.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to that chapter as well. And this is where I think really juicy because
Yeah.
because it's true, we can get so easily locked into one reality. And
well, you actually stay locked into the physical reality if you are looking at just what's happening around you, because then that's what you think about, and then that's what you keep getting the results of. So that's why you have to think, what is it that you want? Really visualize that, create that in the energetic world. And sometimes you have to shut off your senses to know that, okay, I'm not going to keep getting these same results over and over and over. I'm gonna move, I'm gonna lift to a higher level of awareness.
yeah, I'm so glad you made that point, because I've heard that people say that around me before. Well, be realistic, or and I like whatever's in front of me. I'm like, oh, okay, that's feedback. And how do I feel about it? And if it brings me joy, great,
Keep that.
gratitude. And if
Yeah.
let's go back to the drawing board. Okay. There's one experiences, but I'm kind of sheltered with them. But try. Okay, so that's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
And I
Jennifer.
think many people that have had experiences are kind of sheltered to that, and
Yeah.
don't really go out and talk about it much, which is okay.
Definitely. And I think this is why it's, one of the things that inspired us to do this book sharing, these book talks, is because to sort of, I think both of us in our hearts have this desire to normalize, these are coffee talks, right? Coffee talks that, it doesn't just have to be about the weather or, the latest game on, that this can be something that we gather and talk about and share our experiences about over the week, and it's as normal can be, right? I was just looking at what I pulled up on my phone was just a poem, a Pablo Neruda poem, that, and I want to read it, but I don't want to have any copyright issues here on our thing. But I think it would be okay. What do you think, Jen? You can read it?
Yeah, just just say who it's from, be fine.
Okay. Yeah, it's a poem by Pablo Neruda, and it was a friend of mine who had posted it. So I'm not actually even sure of the title of it, to be honest, but it's poignant, and about, you know, only looking at what's in front of us, especially if what's in front of us isn't sparking joy and expanding us. It says you start dying slowly if you do not travel, if you do not read, if you do not listen to the sounds of life, if you do not appreciate yourself. You start dying slowly when you kill your self-esteem, when you do not let others help you. You start dying slowly if you become a slave of your habits, walking every day on the same paths, if you do not change your routine, if you do not wear different colors, or you do not speak to those you don't know. You start dying slowly if you avoid to feel passion and their turbulent emotions, those which make your eyes glisten and your heart beat fast. You start dying slowly if you do not risk what is safe for the uncertain, if you do not go after a dream, if you do not allow yourself at least once in your lifetime to run away from sensible advice. Don't let yourself die slowly. Do not forget to be happy. And so I feel like that's the choice point of, and the fact that this poem has, I don't like to say do not so many times out loud, but as I read that, it makes me want to say, I do. I do. This is what I do. This is what I choose. Because of, you know, staying in that comfort zone. And I feel like that's what the mystical gives us too. It gives us that invitation to feel safe in the uncertainty and to feel expanded by it rather than threatened by it. So.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Pollyanna. Thank you, everybody who's
Thanks so
joined
much,
us
Jen.
today. We appreciate your participation, and we will see you next week as we go over Chapter 9, The Mystical Brain and the Power of 8. Thanks, everyone.